Welcome to the very first episode of the Kata Critic, a brand new show where I have a look at your kata and then provide constructive criticism, aka feedback, to help you improve your karate skills. Let's get started. Okay, before we start, disclaimer. I'm not a kata expert. I've done way more bad kata than good kata. But I've been a member of 2 different national teams. I've trained with some of the best coaches, experts, athletes, and grandmasters around the world. So I know what to look for when it comes to improving your own kata. Because I've tried to improve my own kata for decades now. So in this show, you have sent me tons of your kata videos that I will have a look at, not to roast them or to tell you what you're doing bad, but to see if I can find some kind of ideas for you to improve your karate skills through looking at your kata. And even if you don't practice these specific kata, let's say you're from a different style, or even if you do a different martial art, then hopefully there's something you can learn by looking at these katas together with me and analyzing them when it comes to the biomechanics. However, make sure that you take whatever I say with a big grain of salt, because different styles have different ways of doing kata. And I don't know every style in the world, although I don't try to limit myself to one specific style because I love learning all styles. But I'm not a specialist, I'm a generalist. So what I will be looking at is the general biomechanical principles that all karate styles have in common as long as you have 2 arms and 2 legs. So, with that being said, let's have a look at the very first kata that you sent me. In this case, it is Une Sue. And actually, the video is titled "A Horrible Une Sue Attempt by a 16-year-old orange belt." And already right now, I sense that this is gonna be very juicy. Let's have a look. So what I would say already right now is that the weight distribution in the cat stance is a little bit off. You want to have the majority of your weight at the back leg, and you can see that it's a little bit wobbly right now because there is a lack of core stability and knee strength and probably ankle mobility too because the stance is very high. So before you attempt an advanced kata like Une Sue, in this case, make sure that you have your basic stances in order. This is why, in general, if you're an orange belt, in this case, maybe try to stick to the more simple kata so that you don't develop bad habits that then can basically ruin your whole career, because once a habit sticks, it's hard to change it, okay? Let's keep watching. Okay, seems like you forgot a couple of moves there. That's fine, as long as you keep going. Whenever you forget something, just keep going and pretend like it didn't happen, especially if you're competing. Okay, again, we got the stances, right? You saw that kibadachi, which looked more like a shikodachi. So if you combine them, it becomes like a shibadachi, which doesn't even exist. So make sure that the stances are on point. I can't really tell what stance you're doing if you're combining different stances. So again, stances is the very first thing that we learn in karate for a very good reason. Because you can't shoot a cannon from a cano, or a cano. How do you pronounce that? English is my 3rd language, okay? But the basic idea is that you need a stable foundation. Imagine a pyramid, right? You want the base to be super strong so it can support the whole structure. And that's why a lot of the movements here are a little bit wobbly, because the stance is not really on point. So the center of gravity is not low enough to make sure that there's a good surface of support. Okay, so let's just take a quick pause here. It is pretty evident that the person performing the kata has problems remembering the kata. And that's the very first step if you're going to perform it, to actually first train it so that your body knows what movement is coming next without you having to stop, pause, and think about it. And it's easy to see when somebody's eyes are going in different directions that they're trying to recall what the next move is. So number one is you have to repeat movements over and over again until they get ingrained in your neuromuscular circuits that determine which way to move and how to move, so that you don't have to consciously think about it. You want to make it subconscious or unconscious so that it's in your muscle memory, okay? So make sure you repeat, but don't just repeat for the sake of repeating, but for trying to improve. So each repetition gets better. Otherwise, like I said before, you're just ingraining old patterns, old habits that might not be the best. In this case, for example, the stances. That's always tricky. Okay, so of course, there are tons of things that you can always say when it comes to giving feedback, because kata have layers and layers and layers. But I'm going to try to point out the most obvious one when it comes to each kata. And in this case, I believe the most important thing is the stances. And that's what we call kihon in Japanese. The basic techniques. It's one of the first things that you learn. And in this case, if you're an orange belt, you probably just learned the different basic stances of karate. So make sure that you try to improve those and master those in isolation before you try to integrate it, meaning doing a kata. So start with the kihon and then move on to the kata. And your kata will automatically be better when your kihon is better. The basics are not easy or simple just because they're called the basics. They're actually the most important thing there is, because a kata is just kihon over and over again for 2 to 3 minutes, and then the kata is over. And all you've been doing is different stances, punches, kicks, and blocks in different directions. It's all kihon. So in this case, my number one piece of advice is try to improve your basics, especially the stances, before you attempt advanced kata like Une Sue that might give you bad habits, because we don't want that. Moving on, next kata is Shinto, also known as Gankaku in the Shotokan style, but in this case, the file name is Shinto by Sensei Penel. And listen, I don't know who's performing these videos you sent me. I lost track of who's who, so it's just going to be anonymous, right? I'm not here to bash specific people, but just have a general look at the performances you've sent me and then see what all of us can learn from that, okay? So don't take any of this personally. It's just a learning experience for all of us. Okay, so already right now, since this person is moving in a 45-degree angle, I can tell it's the older Okinawan version of the kata. Okay, so what I'm noticing already right now is a little bit of this timing issue when it comes to the lower body and the upper half of the body. See, when people do kata, what they generally tend to do is that they move their lower body into a stance and then they use their upper body for a punch or whatever. But what you want to do is you want to connect your whole body. So let's say I'm moving from one stance, I'm taking a step and then I'm punching. I don't want to step and then punch. I want to actually start the punch already before the step has started. So my whole body is moving in one compact unit all the way until the moment of impact. So that I'm using what's called zentai ryoku in Japanese, which means full body power. So what I'm seeing now in this kata is the lower body is moving and then the upper body is moving in different ways. So there's a little bit of this disconnect when it comes to the core. And since this is an Okinawan kata, this concept in Okinawa is known as gamaku, which refers to the whole center area, your hips, waist, core, lower back, your abs, and how to basically organize your trunk optimally so that everything is connected in one motion instead of having first one motion with the lower body and then another motion with the upper body. Because that lag is what is gonna have you killed if it comes to a real life street fighting or self-defense application of these techniques. Because you don't have time to move and then do something. You gotta move and do something all in one motion. So already right now, my number one piece of advice when it comes to this specific performance is to try to connect your whole body. Let's keep watching. Another thing that comes to mind when I'm watching this is how the posture is not really solid and stable. The structure seems to have a little bit of imbalances when it comes to the tensegrity. It's a little bit wobbly here and there, up and down. And that might be fine if you're punching and kicking in thin air. But when you're actually, using these moves in self-defense or against an attacker, then you gotta be able to withstand the same amount of power that you generate and deliver into the opponent. And if there's too much slack in the system, you're not going to be able to do that. So a little bit of more stability wouldn't hurt this particular performance, especially in the upper body. And if we're going to be, looking at all of the details, then of course that cat stance might be a little bit wide as well, but that's just a smaller detail. To me, it's more about the functionality of your movements, how you're actually using your body rather than having everything at the perfect angle. We're looking at the big picture here. So again, for this kata, my main piece of advice would be to try to connect the whole body a little bit more so there's no lag between the lower body and the upper body. But the power generation is right. It's good. It's supposed to start in the lower body and then transfer through the arms into the target or the opponent. But there needs to be a quicker connection between that transfer when it comes to your lower body and your upper body. And plus a little bit of more core stability will help with that because there's always a little bit of energy lost when you're wobbling. For example, through your shoulders or through your elbow when there is not enough stability in the system, so there is no economy of movement. But then again, in an Okinawan style kata, sometimes they're supposed to be performed more in this way, which is known as muchimi in the Okinawan language. This sort of soft and snappy movements. And if that's the case, then that's fine. But these are just general points to think about. All right, let's move on. Next kata. This is kata seiyenshin. And again, I have not seen any of these performances before now. So let's have a look. I can already tell that it's a person wearing a t-shirt rather than a gi, which is fine, especially in the hotter, more, humid climates. I actually tend to practice in a t-shirt and shorts myself. So let's have a look. First of all, minus point for the wobbly camera. Anyway. Snappy. I think the timing is pretty okay. Seems a little bit stiff in the shoulders though. Could use more lower body hip power for the moves rather than the shoulders. Again, mostly just arms being used in that specific sequence. It would be a good idea to move the feeling down into the body and sink your shoulders, relax your whole chest area, and then try to use more of your center to produce and generate force in these movements. By the way, this kata is one of those kata that's way harder than it actually looks, and it doesn't have a single kick. But it has a lot of the shikodachi. Okay, I'm getting dizzy by the camera movements. Guys, you need a tripod if I'm gonna have to look at your video. So, already now it's pretty obvious that a lot of the shikodachi stepping back and forth in this kata is not on a straight line. And that's really important in a kata where you repeat the same sequence over and over again. And there are many of these instances in a lot of kata where you need to have the exact same kind of motion over and over again. And unless you can reproduce the same perfect kind of motion, then there's not going to be enough consistency for your kata to be good. So make sure that when you step back in a straight line, it's actually a straight line. And a great way to practice this is, let's say, okay, give me 1 second, I'm just going to get something. Okay, I'm back. So the idea is, you want something straight on the floor when you practice. It could be a rope, it could be your belt, or it could be a staff. So I'm just going to put this here. And then as I practice, I would try to align my stances with whatever tool or thing that I have on the ground to help me move in a perfectly straight line. And this can be used for any kind of stances in any kata. So let's say I'm moving in a front stance. Then I don't want to move over here as I step. I want to make sure that it's perfectly aligned with this straight tool that I'm using, whether it's a staff, your belt, a rope, or even putting tape on the floor. This is what a lot of the best athletes in the sport karate world do, because they want to make sure that each stance is in a perfectly straight line. Okay, moving on. Yeah, and again, this is something that tends to happen in a kata that is so physically exhausting for your lower body, like Seiyenshin is. Your center of gravity starts rising. So look at this cat stance. It's supposed to be twice as low. So when you do a stance in the beginning of a kata and you do the same stance at the end of a kata, you want to make sure that they're consistent. Again, the main theme in this specific performance is to improve the consistency so that all of the moves and stances look identical no matter where in the kata they're being performed. And when you bow, make sure to have a straight back. And that's it for the very first episode of the Kata Critic. I hope you liked this idea. And if you want me to have a look at your kata in the next episode, just drop a link in the comment section. So you have to upload your kata and make sure you're using a tripod, because I don't want those shaky videos. It makes me dizzy. And if you're lucky, I might have a look at your kata in the next episode. Train hard, good luck, and have fun.